Let's be real. Kendrick Lamar isn't just a rapper. He's a storyteller, a poet, an artist who's basically spent his entire career flipping hip-hop on its head. I mean, the guy creates these incredibly dense, literary albums that somehow also become massive commercial hits. It's wild. So how did he do it? How did he get to where he is today? Well, let's get into it.
And that really brings us to the big question, the one that kind of frames his whole career. It's a question that, honestly, before Kendrick, nobody even thought was possible. How in the world does a rapper win a Pulitzer Prize? You gotta remember, that award is almost always for classical music or jazz, so him even being in that conversation, it just shows you what a different kind of journey this is.
And then, in 2018, it happened. The Pulitzer Board actually did it. They gave the prize for music to Kendrick for his album Damn. Can you believe that? They called it a virtuosic song collection that captures the complexity of modern African-American life. This wasn't just a huge win for Kendrick, it was a massive landmark moment for all of hip-hop as a serious art form. Okay, so to really get how he reached a peak like winning a Pulitzer, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning. We're talking about Kendrick Lamar Duckworth, a kid from Compton, California, whose whole voice and perspective were shaped by a city dealing with some really heavy stuff. Poverty, violence, you name it.
And this right here, this is basically the raw material for his music. His parents actually moved from Chicago to get away from gang life, but they ended up right in the heart of it in Compton. So Kendrick grows up in Section 8 housing, on welfare, and he's surrounded by gang culture. Now, he was never a member himself, but he was always watching. He saw everything, including the LA riots when he was just 5 years old.
Man, this quote is it's chilling. He said this after seeing his first murder at 5 years old. A teenage drug dealer was shot right outside his apartment building. And that feeling he describes, that realization that this kind of violence might be something he just have to get used to, that became the central theme in his work. It's all about trying to process that trauma and just survive in a place that can totally swallow you whole. But here's the thing. He didn't just become another statistic. He became the person who wrote it all down. A huge turning point was in 7th grade. His English teacher, a guy named Regis Inga, introduced him to poetry. And that was it. It was like a light bulb went off. Kendrick realized he could take all these feelings, all the things he was seeing, and put them on paper. And that's when the quiet observer started turning into a writer, a straight-A student who was just constantly scribbling lyrics in his notebooks.
And this is the spot, Centennial High School. This wasn't just where he aced all his classes, it's where he became K.Dot. It's where he started battle rapping, getting his skills sharp, and catching the eye of the guy who'd become his longtime friend and business partner, Dave Free. This was his training ground for sure.
All right, so now we're going to see how all that raw talent and hard work starts to build into a real professional career. We're going to track his evolution from that local kid, K.Dot, to the artist who would go on to create some of the most important albums of our time. You know, his moves in the industry were super smart, super strategic. After he built up a name for himself with his mixtapes, he signed with this independent powerhouse, Top Dog Entertainment, or TDE, and that gave him the creative freedom he needed to really find his voice. And of course, that unique sound eventually got the attention of a West Coast legend, Dr. Dre. That led to a huge joint deal with Aftermath. The stage was officially set. And what came next? Just 2 albums that completely solidified his genius. First up, Good Kid, M.A.A.D City. This was his big major label debut, and he structured it like a short film, a cinematic story about his teenage years. But then, he did a complete 180 with To Pimp a Butterfly. This wasn't a film. It was this incredibly dense, complex poem built on live jazz and funk. It tackled these huge themes of survivor's guilt, black empowerment, and racism in America. The artistic jump between those 2 albums is just staggering.
And you better believe the world noticed. 11. That's the number. 11 Grammy nominations for To Pimp a Butterfly. Think about that. No rapper in the history of the Grammys had ever gotten that many nominations in a single night. He ended up taking home 5 awards, including Best Rap Album. Just incredible.
So that brings us to the next phase, the era where Kendrick Lamar goes from being this celebrated, critically loved artist to an absolute, undisputed cultural force. We're talking about the period defined by his masterpiece, Damn.
I mean, look at this run. He was just unbelievable. In the span of just a couple years, he drops Humble, his first #1 single. He releases Damn, his 3rd straight #1 album. He curates and produces the soundtrack for Black Panther, which was a massive hit. And then to top it all off, he wins the Pulitzer. It was just total dominance. He was on top of the entire music world.
So, what do you even call this kind of music? Well, a lot of critics call it progressive rap, and it's basically a term for artists like Kendrick who just refuse to stay in one box. They're pulling from jazz, from soul, from funk, from rock, all while delivering these super complex, socially conscious lyrics that somehow still connect with a huge mainstream audience. He's always pushing the boundaries of what hip-hop can even sound like.
But at the end of the day, it all comes back to the writing, the storytelling. The New Yorker famously called him a master of storytelling, and that just hits the nail on the head. Whether he's changing his voice to become different characters or building a whole album like it's a movie, his ability to craft a compelling narrative is what makes him one of the greatest lyricists, period.
But hey, the story doesn't stop there. Not even close. After hitting what most people would consider the absolute pinnacle of success, Kendrick entered this new phase, a more introspective, more unpredictable chapter of his career. He's proving that he is far from done evolving.
And make no mistake, he is still a giant in this industry. His 2022 Big Steppers tour, it grossed over $110 million. At the time, that made it the highest-grossing rap tour in history. So yeah, he's not some legacy act coasting on past hits. He is still a very active, very dominant force.
Just look at his recent moves. They show an artist who is in complete command of his vision. He launched PGLang, this new multidisciplinary media company, showing his ambitions go way beyond music. He dropped the incredibly challenging, deeply personal album, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Then, he got into that huge rap feud with Drake, which was about so much more than just insults. It was a battle for the soul of hip-hop. And just when you thought he'd said everything he needed to say, boom, he drops a surprise album, GNX, and immediately reclaims his spot at the top, both critically and commercially. He's as vital and unpredictable as ever.
So all of this kind of brings us to a final thought. Kendrick Lamar's entire career is just this powerful testament to deep, meaningful storytelling. We live in a world that's all about fleeting viral moments and social media trends, right? But he's chosen to build entire worlds with his albums, stuff that takes time to unpack. And it really makes you wonder, in this age of constant noise, what does it actually take to tell a story that lasts? Well, Kendrick Lamar seems to have found the answer.